Thanks for staying with us on Point. Let's go to those jobs numbers now. I'm joined by Employment and Labour Minister Thulas Nxesi. Thanks so much for your time on SABC News this afternoon. The quarter one numbers are out, 30.1% unemployment rate. Just your reaction to that and an indication of how many jobs are set to be lost in the coming year because of the coronavirus and more.
Well, the increase in the unemployment rate is as a result of a number of factors. Our economy has always been going down, and we were expecting that during this last quarter of the ending year, we were going to have such results. But we're expecting the worst in terms of the first quarter of this year, of this new financial year. Because of the COVID-19, a number of firms were closed and could not be able to operate. And we can see now a lot of them are talking retrenchments and so on. Clearly, these figures, they represent the pain experienced by the individual workers, their families, and even the communities. And from the side of the Department of Labour, the experience which we have gained in distributing the COVID-19 benefits means that the Unemployment Insurance Fund must be geared up to handle the expected rise in the claims for the ordinary UIF. And what this means is there needs to be a business unusual, as the president has indicated, on how we have to deal with confronting this issue of the jobs in terms of creating the jobs. It really says a major reconstruction of our economy with jobs-rich, inclusive growth strategies addressing these high levels of inequality in the society and combating poverty, because poverty is going to increase.
Okay,
Therefore,
Minister,
we need to
ask you then, while you're talking about the UIF, we know that over 23 billion rand has been paid, and then we also know that over 750,000 employees haven't had access to that 3.3 billion rand because of administration challenges with the UIF and the payment system. So you were quoted in April as saying that the system wasn't ready for millions of claims. Is this still the case? And what's going to happen if we know that those numbers are going to shoot up because of the factors that you've just spoken about?
But if you have been following our figures, you know that we have almost paid more than 4 million workers. And we have paid up to the tune of about 25 billion. There are workers who could not have access to the electronic systems, who now are starting the walk-ins, and we're dealing with those workers. And we have committed ourselves that we are going to be able to pay those workers as long as their documents are showing that they have been contributing and so on. So we are continuing to do that. And we've already started.
My apologies for interrupting. I think that's where the problem comes in because, for instance, the National Employers Association of South Africa is saying that in a survey done by Business Insider that about 21% of companies are struggling to access the payment even though they've got everything in place. There's anecdotal complaints. There's also saying that of the companies which did get money, only 55% were paid in full. Now, we know that you've said that there's challenges with a system that's used to dealing with tens of thousands that now has to deal with hundreds of thousands. So my question is, when are those glitches going to be sorted out? And what is the Labour Department doing in terms of that?
In our view, and I think we don't just have to take what the employers are saying. In our view, we've been able to repurpose our systems. We have done the payments. There are very few payments which are left. And we continue to engage with the employers. And we say to them, let them not rush into the media. They must come to us, those who are having problems. And some employers have come to us and we have been able to deal with those problems. So we can be guaranteed that we have been able to to pay the majority of the employers. However, where there are problems, where there were glitches then, we have been able to correct that.
Okay. Let's speak about the position of workers in the informal sector, freelancers and people who are not part of traditional employment. Is the position of the department the same when it comes to saying that it cannot deal with them at the moment and they must be dealt with social development?
It's illegal unless there's a change of legislation. That legislation doesn't cover them. And we have indicated that several times. Now it means in terms of once we start post-COVID, we must be able to relook at our legislation. If we'd be able to do that, it means we'd have done something which is illegal. We can't do something which is illegal.
Okay.
But this is a debate which would mean let's relook at our policy, let's go into our legislation so that we're able to cover everybody. But everybody must be able to be ready to contribute, because this is an insurance where other workers are contributing. We can't give the insurance to somebody who has not been contributing.
Mm-hmm. So there are about 170 to 200, if I've got my figure correct, labour inspectors across the country who are monitoring compliance with COVID-19 and labour regulations. How does that work? How are they spread out? And how do you ensure that with those around 200 people, they are able to do their work successfully in a way that protects workers across the country?
The labour inspectors are based in our provincial offices. And we have now added about 500 during this COVID period. We've completed our interviews because they were overstretched. They are the ones who are listening, who are doing the inspections in the various factories. But unfortunately, they are not doing now the normal inspection. They are dealing with the issues related to the compliance in terms of the COVID-19 as we are reopening the factories. And unfortunately, we must be able to say they are overstretched. They are looking as to whether the employers are complying with what we have said are the new regulations and the directions which we have given them. And they are working together with the companies. Some of the companies are complying. They are also working with the trade unions. And in some instances, whenever there are problems in particular companies reported by the workers, they are able to rush into those particular areas. And we have said the number of our inspectors will not be able to deal with the challenge which we're facing. We are going to depend on the compliant and responsible employers and also on the trade union movement. So they are distributed in the main provinces. The majority of them are mainly in our industrial centers, which will be Gauteng, Durban, and the whole metro, and also the western corner of the Western Cape. So that's where most of them are based, in the mainly industrial areas. Of course, there are others who are in the all other regions, because there are farms where they have to visit, where there's a lot of what I would say violation of the labor rights of the workers. So we're trying by all means to be there whenever we are needed.
Okay, earlier on in the interview, you spoke about doing business unusual. We cannot continue as a country with the kind of unemployment that we have seen and that we are going to see increasing going forward. You said that there needs to be an unusual look at jobs. Talk to us more about that, and then talk to us about the gap between when that's going to happen and now, and whether perhaps something like a universal basic income grant is being discussed to mitigate the impact that a lot of South Africans are going to feel because of these job losses that are coming.
I cannot be able to pronounce on the universal income grant. That's going to be a discussion. If it's needed, it's going to be a discussion in cabinet, and it's going to be a policy discussion, and let's also listen to what the finance minister will be saying tomorrow. But what is very clear, the president has been able to give instructions that we must focus on the issue of the job drivers. We must focus on the macroeconomic interventions. We must look into building the state capacity and influence, and our policy framework must underpin what we call the interventions. But it's going to be important that we look into where will be the job drivers, which sectors like agriculture, sectors like tourism, and where we talk about the public employment programs, how are we going to massify in those particular areas? So there is a raft of things which we will have to do, we'll have to look at in order to be able to scale up the employment in the country.
Talk to us about what measures you're putting in place to combat corruption when it comes to the UIF, TERS, and the labour sector in general, because that also cannot be dealt with as a normal thing. And what checks and balances are in place so there aren't costly mistakes that happen?
We've put a number of controls. If you remember that when we announced at the beginning of our payment of the COVID benefits, we had indicated that we were going to follow all the monies. We were going to be able to put proper due diligence with the people who are going to follow the money. We said we will do the audits, and we have started now securing the external auditors to be able to help us and do very thorough work in terms of following the money. And we've indicated that we'll also be able to, in terms of our own controls, make sure that what we are paying, we have the reference numbers and the ideas to prevent duplicate payments. But we've also gone to the extent of saying, in this approach of following up the money, a lot of companies, audit companies, have been brought inside. But also we have said we want also the SARS to come in here with some of their companies who can be able to detect fraud and so on, to be able to help us. And we think that we're winning that particular fight because it's not just about one case which has been reported. There are 35 cases which we have been able to identify, and we are following them up together with the law enforcement. And I think we must thank the law enforcement for the speedy recovery and the quick action in terms of what has happened. And it was through the cooperation of the law enforcement, the employer, and also the officials in the department. But what is clear, there is collusion between those outside and some inside.
Department of Employment and Labour Minister Thulas Nxesi, thanks so much for your time on SABC News this afternoon, discussing the jobs numbers that have come out. Unemployment sitting at 30.1% in the first quarter of 2020. That number is surely set to increase and much more.